Good evening, everybody. The second half of our double header is here. Yes, I guess I could use that word appropriately, especially when it comes to baseball, right? So, meanwhile, here we are, 108 Sixes baseball talk tonight. I am great crew. I have George Eichhorn to my right,
Hey, Scott. Good to be back again.
and Eric Katz, who's definitely the young face of this show.
Thank you, Scott.
And we have Jordan Long, who's also been on it for a long time. Welcome back, Jordan.
Thanks for having me, Scott.
You're very welcome. And last but not least, our resident baseball analyst, Warren Brewster. Welcome back, Warren.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you for having me. I love doing this show. It's always a great time.
Well, we love having you, so that's
Thank
great
you.
stuff. So, all right, well, let's get going here. Obviously, we have a lot to get to. The Baltimore Orioles, this is the most bizarre story I've ever seen, and I got to tell you, the Baltimore Orioles suspend play-by-play voice Kevinbrown indefinitely for mentioning the team's woeful record at Tropicanafield, July 23rd in Tampa Bay. He noted that a win would give Baltimore its first series win at the Rays home field since 2017. Comments that upset the team's ownership. Brown has been with Baltimore since 2019, and the team has been through a rebuilding. Now they're in first place with an AL best 70-42 record. You know what, George? I got to go with the guy that's been in the business longer. Give me your take on this one.
Disgusting. Absolutely disgusting. You know, Scott, you and I belong to some prestigious sports organizations, Detroit Sports Broadcasters Association back in the day. You belong to national organizations. So the organization, Scott, out in L.A., come on. Who are they kidding here? What are they trying to do? What are you scared of? Your team is playing well. You're in first place. You're having a great season, and you go and pull this kind of crap. I'm sorry. I got no room for this. I got no room for the treatment of their announcer this way. It's sad. It really is sad. All he was doing was stating the doggone facts, okay? It wasn't like he was sitting out there and making fun of somebody or calling somebody some nasty names or racial slurs or anything like that. So thanks for letting me get it off my chest, Scott. But yeah, there's no room for this. I'm sorry.
Come on, George, you're in the industry that we're in for all this time. Why wouldn't I let you get first on it?
Yeah,
really?
Thank you.
All right. We'll go to the one of the youngest guys on the panel. Go ahead, Eric.
Oh boy, when I first saw that, I nearly blew a gasket, and that doesn't happen very often. Number one, the guy's just doing his job. It was a graphic that was put up on the screen, and he was stating the fact. He's literally doing his job. For the record, yes, the Orioles struggled at the Trop. As a matter of fact, they struggled for a lot in a lot of places, even before the Trop. And this guy is just stating his facts, how the Orioles have turned it around since this season and also parts of last season. He's literally doing his job. But good old Johnangeles, who's no better than his father, was decided to do something so egregious and so obscene that you suspend the guy for a little bit just because he reportedly makes you look cheap. Well, John, look at your payroll. You're 29th in the league. That's pretty cheap to me. But you go ahead and suspend the guy for doing his job. It makes it no wonder your team hadn't won in a while up to this point.
All right, Warren, what do you think? You ever seen anything like this before?
Well, as a player, you realize you don't play good in certain ballparks. When I was with the Phillies, we were a very offensive team. We go to Houston, we'd score 1 run or 2 runs. We go 3-game series and score 5 runs if we were lucky. So they've been struggling the last 4 or 5 years. They've been bad, and they finally turned it around. And you got to think positive and keep them in that vein of positive. But like you said, Kevin, all he's doing is stating the fact. They struggle at the Trop because teams they get their team and they put it around their ballpark, whatever you're playing. If you're playing on turf, you want guys that can run with speed. You might not hit a lot of balls out of the ballpark, but speed never goes into a slump. And when you're playing on turf, the game's a little faster than it is, and Baltimore plays in grass. So they're definitely, their team's set up a lot different probably than the Rays are, and the Rays have good pitching and they probably set their pitching, and align it to face the Rays. I mean, to face the Orioles, and it's an oddity. It's something that as a player you're aware of, but you don't worry about. You don't think about it. You just go out and play 100%, and whatever happens, happens.
Okay, Jordan.
I look at this story and I saw it. I didn't really understand. Now that I understand from what you were saying, Scott and George and Eric, it's ridiculous this guy got suspended. As an announcer, you're supposed to be entertaining and informative and tell people what the facts are. He told the facts and he got suspended. Doesn't make sense. The ownership should be ashamed of themselves. But he shouldn't have gotten suspended for stating a fact.
Right. Yeah, and you know what? I'm going to elaborate on your point, Jordan. Not only should he not be suspended for stating a fact, because that's his job, okay? What I really am happy about is there has been so much backlash in MLB, especially within the announcing community, backing Kevin Brown. I don't remember, George, if I've seen a backlash of any kind towards an announcer situation as I do remember Ernie Harwell when the Tigers let him go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, this one was a firestorm if I ever saw one. And the Tigers were under pressure thanks to Mike Ilitch to bring him back. But this Kevin Brown situation makes the Orioles look bad. And another thing, Baltimore, let the guy go. And I can tell you right now that there's probably 28 other teams, 29, that would hire him all day long. So, Baltimore, I'm glad you're having a good year, but this is just a bad act. And you guys are looking like a bunch of cotton-picking clowns. All right. On to a historical situation. Saturday night, Stevenmatz, 3-7, made history as the St. Louis Cardinals defeated the Colorado Rockies. The Cardinals have now won 10,000 games. I'll go right to left again, George. Stevenmatz will be associated with a milestone win. It may not get him in Cooperstown, but Stevenmatz and 10,000 wins, to me, reminds me of, who was it? I'm trying to remember. Bob Watson in the millionth run, when you think about it.
Right.
It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah, you're right, Scott. I mean, that's one of those high mark achievements, and it's great when and you know this, Warren. If you're that player, you're that individual between those lines that achieve that greatness. All the great things that we've seen. Henry Aaron hitting that home run that night in Atlanta on national television. Like Scott mentioned about Bob Watson, and that's a great achievement. These things are important to baseball. Baseball has always been a game, as you guys know, of statistics and especially feats, as we call them, feats, not the ones on with your toes. I'm talking about FEAT. Anywhere you accomplish a feat, no hitters, perfect games. Of course, we talked about hitting 400 earlier on the show with the kid in Miami, but I'm telling you, this was a great feat, and obviously, what an achievement. And like I said, it's part of baseball's lore, part of baseball's history. To be part of these things is really kind of cool, I think.
All right, Eric.
Well, now Stevenmatz has something to kind of hang his hat on. He's baseball is he'll forever have a place in baseball, no matter how the rest of it, no matter how the rest of his career unfolds. He'll always be known as that guy, and people will remember for him. It's kind of the equivalent of, for example, Tracy Stallard, who gave up Roger Maris's 61st home run. He was definitely not a good pitcher, but he's at least in the trivia question of who gave up Roger Maris's 61st home run, and it was Tracy Stallard. So now he'll have something that he's known for in the game.
Okay, Warren.
Right. Well, and Stevenmatz has struggled his last few years, and he came on to the big leagues and really a hot pitcher and had some really good years, and it's good for him to kind of resurrect his career and have something that he's remembered for. He was an outstanding pitcher early in his career and has struggled recently, but it's like, Steven Traxel gave up Mark McGwire's 70th home run, things like that. It's little things that you remember, and he will be remembered. He'll go down in history of the game. That's good for him.
Jordan?
I think it's just a cool stat. I mean, for him to go out and pitch like he did against, unfortunately, my team that is struggling. I mean, now I have a trivia question of who won the 10,000th game for the Cardinals. It's going to be Stevenmatz. There's still just a cool fact that honestly, I didn't pay attention to until I read the story this week. Still a cool thing for
Right.
Stevenmatz, though.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there are times when you're on the right side of history, and then there's times when you're on the wrong side of history. And for a guy that has my initials, SM, this SM was on the right side of history. That's all I can say. All right, well, we're going to go to the city of brotherly love, a place Warren Brewster is all too familiar with.
Very familiar.
Oh, yeah. Colehamels, Philly, retires after 15 season, World Series MVP during the team's 2008 World Series title. Again, he named the NLCS and World Series MVP. But he ends his career with 163, 122 record, 3.43 earned run average, 2,560 strikeouts, 2,698 innings pitched, and 4-time All-Star. I don't know if this guy's a Hall of Famer, but I'll tell you one thing: he doesn't go ringless, right, George Eichhorn?
That's right. He sure doesn't. He was an important part of that great team there in Philadelphia, and there obviously had a resurgence last year, getting to the World Series again. And I'm a big Dave Dombrowski fan, as you guys know, and it looks like they're going to sweep the Washington Nationals today in a doubleheader. Those are two big wins today. But getting back to Cole, yeah, I've always admired him. I don't think either he's a Hall of Fame materialist under the current criteria that we have, but maybe something down the road. But yeah, he had a good career, good solid guy. I really liked him. I really admired his fortitude and stick-to-itiveness, and he had a good career. I really did think so.
Eric?
Well, Cole Hamels, he's had a good career, was a very good postseason pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies, where especially that run in 2008 where he was, MVP of the NLCS and got the Phillies their first ring since Warren Brewster was playing Major League Baseball.
Right.
And they, and so, he's had a good career. Do I think he's a Hall of Famer? Not really. He was just a good player. I mean, terrific postseason pitcher for the Phillies. He'll have that to hang his hat on. But all in all, good. Just, an overall good pitcher. I mean, had a long career.
Yeah, I'm sure he'll definitely be honored heavily by the Phillies, probably in their Wall of Fame or whatever they have over there. So, and well deserved. He certainly played a positive part of history. So, with that said, Warren, I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think that Cole Hamels was an old school type of pitcher, knowing that he was an innings eater for the time that he had?
Right. He was. I have the distinction of being his first pitching coach when he joined the Philadelphia Philly organization. He came to us in spring training of 2003, I believe, 2002, 2003. And then Carlos and Arroyo and I both had him during extended spring training, and he had what was called a Bugs Bunny changeup. He had just an outstanding changeup, had a good life on his fastball, and it just set up his changeup. And he had a great career and really took off. Was a great kid, hard worker. I mean, I can't say enough for him. I'm glad to see he had the career that he had postseason, everything that he accomplished. Is he a Hall of Famer? Boy, it's by today's standards, he might be, but you got to at least have 200 wins. I mean, in the past, it took 300 or 250 or 280, whatever Bert Blyleven had and those guys, And it's tough with 160, that's not a lot, but he did have a distinguishing career. And who's the last guy that threw a no-hitter before he got traded? That always amused me when he no-hit the Chicago Cubs and they traded him to Texas the next day.
Wow, yeah, that's a great reward. Hardly. That was good. All right, Jordan. I can't top Warren's. I'm going to quit after this.
Cole Hamels, I mean, he'll go down as one of the, at least in 2008, one of the best pitching performances we've seen in the postseason. The thing is, though, do I think he's a Hall of Famer? Who knows, because the standards are so wacky at this point. But the thing is, it's 4 All-Star games and 1 World Series. That's what you want, is to have the World Series, and he can hold his hat high and say, I'm a World Series champion. As for the Hall of Fame, that's up to the voters, because, again, like I said, who knows what the is these days anymore, because there's a lot of players that I thought were Hall of Famers and they're not. But for me, I don't think Cole Hamels did enough to be a Hall of Famer.
Jordan, I'm going to double up back on what you said, and I definitely believe you're right. Number one, Not a Hall of Famer, but he had a complete career. Anytime you have a complete career, what that means, and I think Warren could attest to it probably as much as anybody else. Anytime you can win a World Series and have 4 All-Star appearances, to me, you're proving that you're the best player, for 4 years amongst your peers during the All-Star, and of course you won a title. I mean, complete
Oh, you
career.
think about that pitching staff with Colehamels, Roy Halladay, Cliff Lee, Roy Oswalt, and Joe Blanton. That's what a 5-man rotation. How can you not win a World Series with those 5 horses? I mean, that was what Philly was built around that year. And Cole became the man. He was the most outstanding pitcher in that series, and that's how they won it, was with pitching.
Yeah, Roy Oswalt, my goodness. I mean, you talk about a guy who could have pitched in any era. He was definitely one. It's just a shame that would happen to him tragically. But if you look at his body of work on the mound, I like guys like Roy Oswalt. Because you ever heard of the word complete game? He had a fair amount of them in this era for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Good stuff. Okay, well, you know what, Eric?
Yeah.
You won't comment on it first. You come on it next. Well, how about those Milwaukee Brewers? First place in El Centro, 61 up, 53 down, a game and a half ahead of the slumping Cincinnati Reds. George.
Milwaukee doesn't surprise me. I know that they've kind of retooled a little bit in the last season and a half. I really have always been a Milwaukee fan. I mean, because they were in the American League for such a long time, and I enjoyed watching their baseball and games at Tiger Stadium when they were in the American League. I really do think they got a good shot. I mean, postseason, can they get very far? I don't think so, really, but you never know. I mean, teams get hot in the postseason. They're getting, and the thing is, you got to maintain that consistency. You cannot just have it light that fire right now in August or in September and then fizzle out. You got to maintain that consistency, and contrast that with the Atlanta Braves, who are at such a high point right now that one has to wonder, are they peaking too soon? We've seen that in sports. But Milwaukee, no, Scott, I like them. I think they're a good ball club. And Cincinnati's doing a little bit of El Foldo. Let's see if they can come back in that race. And it would be a really Donnybrook in September. But all my hats are off to the Brewers. I like what they're doing.
All right, now we'll talk to our resident Milwaukee guy, Eric Katz. So I'd like to hear his opinion.
I mean, again, the Brewers, ever since, David Stearns got in there, ever since Craig Counsell became manager, they've always been a scrappy team. You can never count them out. I'd say Craig Counsell kind of has that, quote unquote, Terry Francona pedigree, where he gives that team a fighting chance day in and day out to compete. Now, they get it done with their pitching. That's their bread and butter. Between Burns, Woodruff, and obviously Peralta's really come on late. Really has turned it on as of late. As well as other guys who contribute there. And also, even though their bullpen's not as deep, that team still has a pretty good stopper in Devin Williams, and then Joel Payams, who they got in a minor league deal in the offseason. But he's kind of become their setup man, and you can't go wrong there. As well as another young relief pitcher named Uribe, which they got some. It's not as deep as it used to be, but it still gets the job done. And they're hitting. They've shown they can still be timely. They can get the big hit every once in a while. But the big question is, can their offense carry them? Because their offense is one of the worst in Major League Baseball. But as long as it can be timely enough, because we all know that the postseason, it's like a game of roulette, where someone can get hot at the right time. I don't think anybody foresaw last season the Philadelphia Phillies, who fired Joe Girardi in May. Everybody thought, Rob Thompson's just going to carry this through, and then the jobs obviously was going to be attractive given that lineup. But next thing you know, boom, they appear in the World Series last year and give the Houston Astros all they could handle. But again, it all comes down to, can you get hot at the right time? Because the postseason is a game of roulette.
Anybody knows that more than Warren Brewster on this panel, let me know.
Right.
Warren.
Right. Yeah. The object's to get into the postseason. Once you're in there, you don't know what's going to happen. You get hot like the Phillies did. They were the 6th seed last year, and they went all the way to the World Series. And I love the race between Cincinnati and Milwaukee. They've been going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the dark horse in that in that division is the Cubs. All of a sudden, the Cubs won 10 or 12 straight. You know, are they going to continue to? They made a couple deals, you know, so they might be a contender also. That's going to be a great race down the stretch. You know, I love all three of those teams. You know, they're all good teams, and just like you guys have said, Craigcounsell's turned that club around, and you know, and to me, as a player, you take on your persona or your personality of your manager. You know, and when you have a guy like a Craigcounsell who was a go-getter, had this bite and scratch and claw for everything that he got as a player, you know, that can't help but carry over to the ball club, you know. And the one thing I'm glad to see is Christianyelich coming back and you know, hit 225 or whatever he had. You know, he's come back. He's been productive again, you know, and good for him. I'm glad to see him turn it around and get back, you know, because he's the leader of that ball club, I'm sure. You know, he's the leader in that clubhouse. He's a silent, you know, real quiet guy, but he's the leader in that clubhouse, you know, and you need leaders that are going to carry you down the stretch of September, especially when you have young kids on the club that are, you know, they haven't been through that yet. And you have to have somebody to rely on and talk to and understand, you know, relax, just play the game, just play your game. Don't try to do more than you can do. You know, stay in your lane. Just stay in your lane, do what you can do, and everything will be fine.
Hey, Jordan.
I have to agree with Eric. I mean, you have great pitching. The question is their lineup, but like Warren said, you got Christian Yelich back. That's going to certainly help. But the thing is, though, you're only 2 games ahead of the Cincinnati Reds and 2.5 above the Chicago Cubs. We're in August right now. You got this month and next month, but you don't want to peak you don't want to peak too early, like George was saying. The thing is, though, I do see the Brewers at making the playoffs. Whether they're going to win the division, that's up to them. But I could see them as a wild card team at worst. But I do think they are the best team in the division.
Okay. All right. Final topic before we go to parting shots. Texas Rangers atop AL West with a 67-up 46 mark, 3 games ahead of the Houston Astros, who recently the Rangers added maxscherzer. The Astros added Justinverlander. Boy, those names are familiar. They're associated with Detroit Tiger folklore. But meanwhile, they're both in Texas, not having to pay any state income tax, considering where they were in the high rent district of the metropolitan New York area. No, I'm not your tax expert, so if you want to know about it, don't come to me. I don't want to know about it. George Eichhorn, how about them Texas Rangers?
Yeah, how about them, Scott? Boy, I tell you what, like I told you guys before, if you would have told me that Max and JV would have been reunited on the Mets, okay, that's one thing. I might not have believed, but would I have believed by August they would both be on different teams? Heck no. So it's quite interesting for those of us who have Detroit connections to these two guys. And as you guys know, it was a great time when Jimleyland managed them here in Detroit, and Dombrowski was in the front office, and Cabrera was there, and Maglio, and all the guys. It was a great time, a fun time in Detroit. Of course, made to 2 World Series. All that being said, yeah, that's going to be a heck of a race. I'm telling you, Houston, I mean, you know, picking up JV, that's incredible in itself, but they're going to be able to really have a dogfight. Like Warren was saying about the Central and the National League. I mean, this is going to be a good race. I do say that Texas Rangers have the edge right now, but we'll see what happens. I think Texas got more firepower. And another interesting thing, if you guys didn't know, so JV happened to be at the Biden White House because the Astros were just invited there yesterday. And so even though he was going to miss that ceremony, he somehow made that ceremony as a member of last year's championship team. They got their official visit to the White House. Anyways, a little tidbit for you guys there. Enough said. Texas, I'm still going with the Rangers to win that division, Scott.
Well, the state of Texas is definitely big enough for Justin Verlander and Max.
Yeah, true.
If you've ever driven that state from one to the other and you're looking to drive, you better budget 21 hours on the generous side, because I've taken that trip. I'm sure, Warren, you've probably seen that trip a time or two. It's a long state. All right. I've done it a couple times. I wouldn't say that's a bucket list, but it's a trip you don't forget. So with that said, Eric, go ahead.
Well, I mean, first off, what's happened with the Mets and what they did at the deadline, that kind of deserves a 30 for 30 on ESPN in and of itself. But as far as JV and Max goes, number one, Texas, the Rangers, it doesn't surprise me what they did and made all those moves because they want to win. They have the edge in the AL West. They also, even before that, they added Aroldis Chapman, who somehow kind of had a little bit of a resurgence after going to Kansas City for a little bit, of all places. But he's confident in his stuff right now. After DeGrom went down, I knew they would need an ace. Never did I think that Scherzer would be the guy that they would go after. Personally, I had them going after Dylan Cease if the Sox made him available. But this everybody's been talking about the AL East and how rough and tough that division has been all year. But man, the AL West just got significantly better, and that race is going to be entertaining between two guys who were teammates for part of the season against on one of them's back with the defending champs and the other one's with the upstart Rangers. Boy, the AL West is going to be exciting come September.
Turn it over to Warren.
Well, Bruce Bochy has a track record, and so he's leading that Texas team, and they've turned it around, and they went out and got some pieces that are going to make them a contender. They're not going anywhere, and Houston's been last 5 years in the World Series, so until they get knocked off, hey, that's the team to beat, And then you got the Angels, who are laying in the weeds, and so is the Mariners, so there's 4 teams in that race that are all, you don't know what's going to happen, but Houston and Texas are the 2 teams. They're the top teams. They're both going to make the playoffs. Definitely, they're both very, very good teams. They're well put together and they're not going anywhere, and Tampa Bay's fallen off. Baltimore has surged. The Central, everybody's 500. So but again, one of them's got to make the playoffs, so you never know what's going to happen. But I like the West. I think both those teams, Houston and Texas, are coming on right at the right time of the season.
Okay, George, you have last word on this.
I looked at my previews for this year. I never thought that the Rangers, I thought would be good, but I didn't think they would be in first place. I thought the Astros would be, but now the Rangers, they look like they're a team that's going to make a postseason and probably is going to end up winning the division. Of course, as we've all said, Houston's going to have something to say about that. But for right now, the Rangers are in the driver's seat. Do I see them winning the division? I do. The Astros, I think, will get the wild card spot.
Okay. All right. Well, we're going to go on to the parting shots. I think that I was happy for Justin Verlander and Max Scherzer to get back in a pennant. I think they were both disappointed that the Mets underachieved so badly with a large payroll. But I guess the old story or adage goes, you can't buy a pennant. Maybe once upon a time George Steinbrenner did, but it's not working these days. I don't think so. All right. So with that said, George, I know you got a really good parting shot. I want to hear yours first.
Yeah, it was a sad day in Detroit today as we lost yet another member of our 1968 World Championship team's backup catcher, Jim Price. Jim Price has been in the broadcast booth in Detroit, working with the late Ernie Harwell for many, many years. He worked with Larry Osterman. He worked with Frank Beckman, and more recently, of course, with Dan Dickerson. And so it's a very sad day. We lost our announcer. Jim has a wonderful cause. His son is autistic, and Jim and his wife have headed up a foundation for many, many years now for autism for kids. And he's been a pillar in the community. I heard one guy say today, which is very nice. He says, Jim always would be the type of guy that would say, hey, let's grab lunch together. And he says, it's on me. It's on me. And Price liked to pick up the tab, which is a very nice thing to do. And I got one little other story. Sometimes I would escort a guest up into the press box at Comerica Park, and there was a photograph of the 1968 champions. Jim would always make it a point to show the guest that I had there with me and point to himself in that picture. And he said, and that's me. That's me. I was the backup catcher, he says, but that's me from 1968. So we bid adieu to a great man, a great Tiger, as we say goodbye to Jim Price. Let me thank everybody in Detroit and the Motor City for giving me the opportunity. And thank you, Scott, as I know you've known him as well for many, many years.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? Before I turn over to Eric, I got to know Jim Price a lot, especially in spring training. And I remember at my time at Miller Park when the Tigers played a 3-game series. We spent some good time there. It was so interesting about Miller Park and with Ken Cal because he was doing the broadcast that particular week, filling in on radio. And I told them, "You see that restaurant there Fridays? Candy and I got married at it." And boy, Jim was really smiling in elation, as was Ken Cal, a guy who I take a lot of pride in. But I got to know him really well during spring training, and occasionally you won't find a nicer person than that. Warren, I want to. Do you have any thoughts about Jim Price? I know you've been around the game a while.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's anytime an organization loses an icon like a Jim Price, that it really it leaves a hole in the organization, and he will be definitely well remembered, and I'm sure as the season goes on, they will remember him in the way he deserves to go out and be honored in great fashion in Detroit. He was an icon. I mean, 41 years. What more can you ask? And then played 7 for the Detroit Tigers. So it's quite a he was quite a pillar in the Tiger community.
All right, kneecap biting Jeremy Ballerick. Rest in peace, Jim Price. You'll be missed by many, no doubt about it. And also one other one I want to mention a little bit earlier. Good evening, panel. Great job, Jeremy, leading us off on Inside the Pigskin. Don't forget, this guy's a valuable part of our team. We're glad that he's with us. So, all right, we're going to go to Eric Katz's parting shot. Go ahead.
Well, happy for brucebochy that, again, the guy's been successful everywhere he's gone, with San Diego early, with San Francisco during that odd run of World Series, and also now Texas Rangers. Always a great manager. As a matter of fact, that leads me to a story that the current San Francisco Giants announcer John Miller told at an event that I was at quite a few years ago. John Miller was obviously part of the Giants broadcasting team, so naturally he gets one of their World Series rings. Can't remember which one, but it was one of them. And he wasn't wearing it one day, and brucebochy's like, in his very deep gravelly voice, is like, "Why aren't you wearing your ring?" And he's like, and John Miller explaining like he had nothing to do with the wins and blah blah. He's like, and in true Bochy fashion, he's like, "I didn't have anything to do with them either. I just made a move. I just made a move and prayed that it worked." But yeah, Bochy knows he doesn't take the credit at all. He leaves it all for the players, and that's what you want in a manager. And Texas has that in him, and that's why he's been successful every single place he's gone. And to me, he'll one day hopefully be enshrined in the Hall of Fame.
Don't forget the fact they won 3 championships with the San Francisco Giants too. So
you
don't win 3 titles because you're stupid. All right, Warren, go ahead.
let's San Diego to another one.
Right, exactly. So I mean, and all this does is all his past, and then he comes in and leads Texas to the best record in the Western Division right now. Definitely going to be a playoff contender, be in the playoffs. It's another feather in his cap. It just proves what a great manager he is and how he knows how to run a ball club. He knows how to push the right buttons, and he's done a great job with them. And Texas hasn't been a contender in a while. And he put a lot of different pieces. They've gone out and made moves to get the pieces that he needed, and now he's pushing the right buttons, and they're definitely in the thick of things.
All right, you know what? This is a good point, George. Jeremy asked this one. I really like this question. So we're going to get it up there. So George, he has a question where when should the Tigers call up the infielder they traded, and of course set Baez? That's a great question. I'll let George answer this.
Baez has obviously been a thorn in a lot of people's side, obviously, since he came here. He has not been the player that Detroit had hoped for coming over from the Cubs, both fielding and he can make a fantastic play, but then some of the routine plays he's caught throwing the ball away or throwing it in the dirt or whatever. It's just a disappointment with the glove. With the bat, pretty much the same, obviously. You can't hit just 220, 230 when you were given that kind of money and that kind of contract. The Tigers are not going to fall victim. I'm telling you, they are not. Scott Harris is not going to bring these kids up like everybody wants them to. It's just not going to happen. I mean, yeah, they rushed Spencer Torkelson up at first base. Riley Green was hurt a little bit, so he was kind of ready for the big leagues. I don't think Torque was ready. They brought him up a year too soon, but he's not going to be one of these guys that's going to bring up Parker Meadows and all these other kids right away. So, Jeremy, I don't get your hopes up. I mean, there is an outside chance when the rosters expand in September, we might give a couple guys a chance, a cup of coffee or a little look-see. I'm sure most teams do that, but don't look for that to be a call up here in August. I just don't think it's going to happen. But I know the fans want it to happen. They want to see some new blood. They want to see some exciting new players, but they're not going to sit by as right now. That's not going to happen.
Okay, Warren, let's go to your parting shot.
Sure. Well, I just to reiterate what George just said, you don't want to bring kids up too soon. When you bring them up, you don't want to have to send them back, and they had to do that with Torkelson, and you don't want to have to do that. You want to be able to bring them up and they get their feet on the ground and you're patient with them and you let them go and they play and they fit in, and they realize after a couple weeks or a month or whatever it takes that they belong there. They realize that they can play there. And if they have any doubt, that's the last thing you want to do is put a doubt in the player's mind. These kids are going to play in the big leagues and there's no sense rushing them. You don't want to ruin them. You want to take their time. They're going to be a contender. They're in a rebuild, and you understand the fans want to see these guys, and they will in time, but you've got to make sure that they're ready. And, the organization, the people that run organizations, if they're doing it right, they'll bring these kids up when they're ready to be up there, and they don't have to send them back. They stay up there for good, and they get their feet on the ground as a group. I mean, look at the 84 Tigers. That group of Parrish and Whitaker and Trammell, those guys, they all came up together. They came up as a group, played as a group, and they all fit in. It took a little while to adjust, but, in time, they were the best team in the 84 by far. They were head and shoulders above everybody, and that's what it takes. And especially in today's game, teams Houston, what they've done has been, teams model themselves after them, the way they've gone about their business, where they've been a contender for so long and go out and get the pieces. So Detroit's in a rebuild. Baltimore's done a great job turning their organization around, and Detroit's on the way. They've built, and they're, next year they should be a contender for the Central.
Yeah, another thing too, they won't have that big contract with Miguel Cabrera, so they might have a little extra money to spend in free agency. So, all right, Jordan, what's your parting shot?
FIBA Basketball World Championship will be played in the Philippines, Japan, and Indonesia. A lot of these superstars are actually playing in this. Jamal Murray, who plays for the Nuggets, is on Team Canada. Luka Doncic for Dallas is with Slovenia. Giannis Antetokounmpo is with Greece. But my point here is, why are these players playing? We saw that the Nuggets had a bench player, Vlatko Čančar, go down. Now he tore his ACL. He's out for the entire season. That's going to come up this year. I just don't understand. I get wanting to represent your country, but the risk is too high for injuries, especially for a FIBA World Championship. It's not the Olympics. The fact of the matter is I hope, if a superstar goes down, owners are going to reconsider sending these players, and hopefully these players will get the idea that the risk does not outweigh the reward.
Good point. I only brief parting shot. I wanted George to have the Jim Price one, and that was by design, because obviously George sent me the news, and he was a perfect person to lead off with it. Maybe there is a pun intended, since baseball's about leading off anyways. But anyways, I'll talk about the LA Angels, who won 7 since the trade deadline. You know what? I will give the Angels credit for trying to be buyers instead of sellers at the deadline, but whether they make the playoffs or they don't make the playoffs, Shohei Ohtani will be playing somewhere else next year. But that said, this concludes this edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. But before we go, we'll let everybody know how they can get a hold of us, with George Eichhorn being last. Go ahead, Eric.
You can follow me on my Twitter at SportsSceneNews, or you can find me on my blog at bellyupsports.com, where I write all things baseball.
Jordan.
You can follow me on Twitter at SportsScoop1. I have a blog that write Mondays through Fridays at sports-scoop.com. I'm still in the works of getting my own live show. Be sure to listen for details on that in the coming weeks.
And of course, you're a regular here on 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. Don't forget that when you come on here or anywhere else, because this is where we have you scheduled once a week. All right. Before I go to Warren and George, I do want to point out one more time. The 108 Stitches Baseball Talk is being broadcast around the world. The audio version of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk can be heard on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever you get your podcasts. Please hit the red subscribe button on YouTube, South Florida Tribune. Excuse me, we're striving for 1,000 subscribers. Please also comment, like, and share the broadcast. Want to be a guest? No problem. Participate in the chat room. That'd be pretty good, too. Or send your topic ideas to southfloridatribune@gmail.com. If you want to advertise cost efficiently, call myself, Scott, at 954-304-4941. We broadcast live on Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube. Our website's www.southfloridatribune.com. Twitter at Tribune South. Candy Ebeling is behind the scenes. Yeah, Jeremy, who wouldn't be lobbying for Shohei to Detroit? I think you have probably 9 other cities that are lobbying for him, too. All right, so who's left?
Warren?
Yes, I can be reached at Brewster, BRUSSTAR40 @gmail.com.
All right, I said my piece, so we'll leave George Eichhorn and his book for last.
Yeah.
There's our man, Jim Price,
Right.
with Dan Dickerson. That's a photograph in my book that I'm proud that I put that in there. I got a book called Detroit Sports Broadcasters on the Air. There's a link to that book to purchase it at the end of my column, which is the Motor City Tribune. And I also write for the Detroit Monitor locally. And also you can see me on any number of Scott's programs. Scott's in the book as well with Jimmy Connors and Muhammad Ali. And even I'm in the few pictures. I don't know why. I shouldn't have done that, but I did. But anyways, you can also reach me at LinkedIn under my name, George Eichhorn, or on Twitter or X, whatever it's called, at SandGSports99.
Great show, guys. Hope everybody enjoyed this edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. Again, we try to do the best we can with the most timely topics. And, you know, every now and then when somebody passes on, a guy like Jim Price, what can you say? He's a class act. You know, I've interviewed like 12 catchers, I think, in my lifetime. You know, he was one of them. I don't know what it is about the catcher position, but geez, Pete, folks, when you play the position, you can relate to him well because, you know, that's the one position that you're heavily involved in. And I know how to talk the catcher language. But what a show we had tonight. We appreciate everybody's participation in the chat room tonight. So as I said, an earlier programming note, 108 Stitches Baseball Talk will be on Monday night, one time only, as I get ready to return to Metro Detroit for a 5-day break. So meanwhile, we want to thank everybody else for joining us on this edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. So on behalf of George Eichhorn, Eric Hatz, Warren Brewster, Jordan Long, we want to thank you, and we will catch you on the next episode. Good night, everybody. Be safe, and God bless.